Hi, my name is Jamie Utt, and I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant who's been working with schools for more than 10 years to try to end the problem of bullying in our school communities. Today, I'm here to talk with you about a particular way to think about bullying in hopes that we can start to act a little bit more as whole communities, bringing together teachers, students, and parents to prevent bullying before it actually happens in our school communities.
My name is Joseph Blair. I have three boys, ages 18, 11, and 8, and I am Executive Director of Blair Charity Group, a nonprofit organization in Tucson, Arizona.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, today we're sitting down with different parents and talking about bullying, and particularly we're talking about the concept of identity-based bullying, meaning that bullying isn't just sort of a general problem that requires general solutions. It's usually happening for very specific reasons, targeting specific identities. So I'm curious, as a parent who has a wide range of ages of kids, what questions you have or what advice you might be able to offer other parents in trying to work through that process.
Well, I think advice-wise, it's just really to be cognitive of what's happening constantly, and really ask your kids those tough questions. Sometimes it's probably the most difficult thing. What I've found by even working with kids through my nonprofit is a lot of the parents just don't ask the tough questions. They don't want to hear the answers. They don't want to hear the wrong answers. So always having that constant open communication with your kids, that's probably the biggest thing that I think can really offset a lot of bullying and bullying tendencies if it is your child that might be doing the bullying. And if you're not doing those things and really dealing with their aggressions when they seem a little more aggressive, because if you're not dealing with it at home, it's going to be funneled out somewhere else. And I think that it all starts at home. That's pretty cliche to say, but it all starts with good communication at home. And then if you're doing that correctly, then I really think that can offset a lot of the issues you'll have down the line.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think that's what you say about it all starts at home. That is often thrown around as a cliche, but that is the key, right? That is the key to these issues, is understanding that we have the most influence over our young people. Even when we don't feel like they're listening to us, we have that
for
influence. Sure. So, excellent. Any questions that you have about?
Well, I think I'll tell you probably my biggest issue that I've had with my oldest, 18 years old now, is when he was younger, he had stuttering issues, and obviously it was a big problem for him just to deal with it on a day-to-day. He would tell me, people at school called me weird, and just I constantly talk him through those things and get to it. Well, now he's to the point now where he's older. He's a pretty big kid. He's starting to excel in sports, where he's becoming more into the in crowd.
Yeah.
And I still see at times that he still has those tendencies of when he was young, where he kind of becomes very timid and introverted. But then when he's around his other friends and he becomes part of the in crowd, I see him start to do that with the other people that aren't on the in crowd. And I guess my major question is, how do I teach him to be more empathetic with those kids that are going through the situation that he went through? Because what he dealt with at such a young age, and now he's at an older age where kids are a little bit more grown into their own. So it can be even more traumatic or less traumatic, really depending on each individual. And just trying to offset, and I really just want to teach him to be more empathetic of the situation, of what he's went through. But at the same time, I'm happy that he's came out from where he's come from to where he is now. So I don't want to push him and say, oh, you need to stop doing that, because it might make him revert back to the introvert state that he had before.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say before sort of answering the question is I love the point that you're making, which is so often we treat people who are exhibiting bullying behavior, even if it's little subtle things, just pushing people to the outside of our in-group, as if they're terrible human beings, right? When the reality is that so often, study after study has shown that so often people who are exhibiting bullying behavior are doing it from their own insecurities, right? And so it's likely that, like you said, when he was younger, if he was teased, that it's coming from those lingering insecuriries when he sort of maybe pushes other people to the outside or isn't being as empathetic. And so that, first of all, I appreciate that perspective of, sort of where it might come from. But as far as addressing it, I think sort of two things are really important from what I understand from the research that I've done over 10 years of trying to prevent bullying in schools. One is if there are ways that you can think of to model for him empathy that you think might get through, I think that those are some of the most powerful lessons that we can teach as parents. And so I think about when I was a kid, I remember distinctly using language like, oh, you're such a fag and that's so gay, right? Like a lot of kids use that. And my parents never talked to me about it. They never talked about why that might be problematic. They never talked about how that might hurt other people to hear words like fag and the history of fag and faggot. And that's one example of lots of different ways that it could have been different for me, is for my parents to sit down and say, hey, like, do you understand what that word means? Like, how that might hurt people in our family or people that we know. Same thing with any sort of behavior, like trying to demonstrate. But then aside from that, the other thing is really engaging them in asking questions, like you said, asking those tough questions of hey, like I noticed that you used to hang out with so and so, and now I saw them alone at the basketball game that we went to, or to the concert that we went to. Like, what's up with that? And trying to get into, oh, well, they're not hanging out with us for X, Y, and Z reasons, and then trying to ask, well, how do you think it makes them feel? Getting into those tough questions. And I think the key with that is it gives them agency to make or to notice, even if they haven't, maybe they have noticed or they haven't noticed, and they don't want to deal with it or whatever. It gives them the agency to begin to question that and say, oh, well, maybe I am being a little bit of a jerk based on that conversation I had with dad or with mom. And that's a tough conversation to have, because again, you don't want to make them feel like they're a jerk and make them revert. But by doing it in a way that's just like sort of a friendly banter, oh, I noticed that X, Y, and Z is happening. Like, what's going on with that? That might be able to disarm them without coming to them and being like, hey, it seems to me you're being a jerk, right? Like you're being the jerk that other people used to be to you. That's not going to disarm them. That's going to make them feel uncomfortable. So that, I think those two things, is modeling and then finding empathetic ways to ask them about it and have those tough questions, those tough conversations with them, are key. So,
great.
Excellent. Any other questions or thoughts?
Really just going back to what you said, I think the main thing that I'm taking away from it is also just for them to understand that, especially for my son, to understand that to be included doesn't mean he needs to take up those negative actions. And that's the biggest thing I'm trying to get across to him, because he thinks that, okay, they were mean to me, so for me to be like them, I need to be mean to other people as well. And that's one of the big things I've seen, not only with my son, but working with other kids that have felt excluded. As soon as they get in the in crowd, now they become one of the mean girls or mean boys,
right,
or whatever it is, because they feel, okay, now that's the behavior I have to maintain
right,
in order to maintain my acceptance. So that's one of the key things that I think is also important, and I'm glad that we got to talk about all this.
Yeah. Well, and one more thing that you might consider sharing with him is that when I do the student leadership training around being an upstander and changing their own behavior, I say there's three kinds of upstanders. One is what I call a social normer, somebody who tries through their own positive behavior to change the social norms of their groups or of the people that they're around, right? Demonstrating, leading by example. Another is an interrupter, and that's often the scariest one, meaning that if you see someone being a jerk to someone else, you interrupt it and talk to them about it, right? That can be scary. And then the last one is simply being what I call a first responder, meaning that you, after an event where someone has been mistreated or neglected or pushed to the margins of the school community, you go and talk to that person and talk to the person about, how that felt and how you can support them. And then also, if your friends are being jerks afterwards, go and talk to them and be like, hey, that's not cool for X, Y, and Z reasons. And that can be a really empowering thing to have choice about how to be a positive influence in your school, whether it's just that you're going to lead by example, or you're going to interrupt it when it's happening, or after it's happening, go talk to somebody about it. That might help him to feel like he has some agency in how he can be a positive influence.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.